Welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of Coral, Kelp and Community. This week, I have the pleasure of speaking with Alexandra Pimor for the Earth Loss Center, working out of Paris. We are diving into the origins and philosophy behind nature-conscious governance. Let's start with the basics of what is it, and maybe where did this idea come from?
All right, I'll start by saying where this idea came from because I think that might explain it a little. And just to give you a little bit of context, I was a senior law lecturer at Liverpool John Moores University for 18 years or so, 20 years or something like that. And throughout my career, I was teaching in particular European Union law and being French, teaching EU law in the UK. It never occurred to me when I first started that British people didn't actually feel, strongly European. I did, and it was a bit of a surprise for me. So when I realized that my students did not feel European, I was like really shocked. I was like, "Oh, how is that so?" So I started looking into the origins of EU law and the European Union in particular, and through the way that I was teaching them. And as I was doing that, I really dived quite deeply into the history of the European Union. And I understood then that the European Union is not just an economic entity, contrary to popular, beliefs and the main narrative, really. The European Union started as a spiritual adventure. And it was based, the European Union would not have been able to actually arise without a sense of being European, that commonality, right? So there's a sense of European identity. There's a sense of a common European continent. So a geopolitical location for all of this. And when you look at the way that Europe was actually constructed, it was constructed mainly through wars and conflict. And then the Second World War occurred, and afterwards, the founding fathers thought we can't keep on doing this because Europe was nearly destroyed. And the idea was like, what can we do differently? Because here's the thing, we will always get what we have if we always do what we have done. So something has to change. For a different outcome to occur, something has to change. And so when I looked at the European Union, what changed? The founding fathers decided to lay down arms and instead to sit at a table and use the law, the legal order, to create a sense of commonality, a higher spirit, a higher entity that would federate all the European countries. And so what you see here, for me, is the first instance of conscious governance. Governance means to rule ourselves, to regulate ourselves, rather, actually. It's like a human being, having to self-regulate physiologically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. It's the same for the European Union. It's the same for every creation. We have to regulate ourselves so that we can actually live in harmony in order to thrive. And the whole point of the EU was to regulate, itself in this higher entity so that we would actually promote peace and harmony. This is what is actually contained in the foundation constitutional documents. So looking at this, I was really just flabbergasted by the first instance of conscious governance at the supranational level. There was a change, a shift in consciousness that has barely been observed, that has barely been actually, even researched. And so when I stepped into the space of earth law in particular, and when I was first given the opportunity to step into the role of nature proxy, this is when I realized what it could mean in practice for all of us to actually put it in practice at the, the micro level. Because if we're looking at the European Union at the macro level, when you look at our individual selves, then our smaller community selves, our smaller organizational selves, we are part of the inner system. It starts from within, that change, that conscious change. So nature conscious governance is not the governance of nature. It is instead the reintegration of nature consciousness within our human systems, if that makes sense.
That is a great explanation. Like, with such historical context, it feels very meta, but also like, yeah, that is a really deep understanding of what it is you're doing. Um, and so with that new level of consciousness
Mm-hmm.
in humanity and nature and governance, what are the goals of nature conscious governance? What is it supposed to achieve, at least in theory? We'll start with theory.
Of course. For me, in the way that I understand it, in the way that I want to practice it, the whole aim, the vision of nature conscious governance is to promote harmonious living on earth. That's it. I want us to be able to seek joy. I want us to be able to cultivate happiness. I want us to be able to cultivate and nurture wealth. And by wealth, I mean W/health, wellness and health. That's what wealth is. Wealth is not a financial, purely economic, monetary, expression of being rich. The richness of life is made of the fabric of life, which is made of relationships, which is made of love, which is made of energy, because that is what we are first and foremost. We are energy turned into matter. So the whole point of nature conscious governance is for us to understand that we are nature and nature is life. And life is relational, life is relationships, life is energy, life is love. And the only point, the real, I suppose, reason for existence is to live a life. And a life worth living is a life that is full of happiness and joy and love. And there is nothing stopping us from reaching that level of cultivation of happiness. But we are overcomplicating things as human beings. And because we are so afraid, we are afraid of what? We are afraid of not having enough. We are afraid of not being enough. We are afraid of not being loved, of not being seen. These are all basic human needs. If you look at the pyramid of needs, in Maslow's pyramid of needs, and when you think about human givens as well, what you see is that what drives us primarily is a need for feeling secure, feeling safe, feeling loved, and feeling like we belong. And when we don't feel that way, that's when we snatch, that's when we hoard, that's when we become greedy, that's when we wage war. That's when we try to actually make sure that we have everything that we need when others may actually be starving. That's what happens when our needs are not met. So nature conscious governance is for us to understand that there is an abundance of life on this earth, that we are not, as human beings, superior to any other species or life on this earth, but we are a part of it, an integral part of it right now. And I'm saying right now because right now we are the ones who actually are causing havoc on this planet. So, yes, so essentially the whole point of nature conscious governance is to practice peace and harmony. And peace is not a destination, it's a practice. You don't achieve peace, you cultivate and nurture it. So, nature conscious governance is cultural because culture is the stuff of life. Culture is actually a way of life. So, that's what nature conscious governance is all about.
You just spoke to me on so many levels. I almost cried. Like, and I don't think that's what a lot of people expect to hear when they think of nature conscious governance or like nature on the board of like a nonprofit or a corporation. Like
Mm,
the things you just expressed, I don't think are the first things that come to mind for people. And I'm so glad that you said those things because I mean, that is really at the heart of everything we're doing, or
mhm.
at least it should be. Like,
Well, it is. We just have been believing, creating, writing, and enacting a narrative that promoted division and a dissociation from being because we have become human doings rather than human beings. We have become human thinking over human feeling. And it's easy to understand why that is because when you don't feel and when you are not being, first and foremost, you are in a state of performing a particular act. And the dissociation, the separation allows you to perform in that act in a way that is, um, that can be cruel, in a way that can be aloof and cut off, disconnected. So, there is an expression that for me means a lot, but when you don't feel, it's easier to kill.
mm,
So when we don't feel in the way that we make our decisions in the world, in the corporate world in particular, even in the political world, when we don't feel, when we have no empathy and compassion, because, these are not supposed to be attributes that you attach to making decisions. When you don't feel, it's easier to press the kill button. But when you don't feel, that's when you actually extinguish life. And that is exactly what we are doing. So we have to feel. And here's the other misconception. We think that the primacy of the rational mind will save us. But the rational mind is what has actually brought us here. I am not because I think, I am because I feel. And I'm French, by the way. So for me to be saying this, it's like quite controversial, but this is what, Descartes said. But I am not because I think. I am first and foremost because I feel. I've said it before, when we are born, we don't think first, we feel. When we feel, we send out tendrils to connect. When we connect, we can ease ourselves into a relationship where we can relate. And therefore, we can learn, we can grow. So the rational mind, to me, is in service to the feeling mind or the heart mind. Because, again, I've said this before, but any real substantial, meaningful decisions any one of us has ever made in life. Who to marry? I'm talking beyond, arranged marriages or marriage of conveniences. But in any case, who we love. Any real decisions that we've ever made come from the heart, because our heart knows what is right and what is wrong. Our heart knows what feels right and what feels wrong, and then our minds rationalize that. So the rational mind should be in service to the heart. We should feel first. I want to feel first, and then I know whether it's right. And this is what nature conscious governance aims to do as well. So we're looking at the integration of inner development goals alongside sustainable development goals, because the one does not go without the other.
wow. Yes. So much yes. Um, so wow, so many directions we could go with what you just said. It's so good. Actually reminded me of when I was like 8-ish years old. I remember thinking to myself, why do adults make everything so complicated? Like I was okay with like nuance and areas of gray and that kind of thing, but it seemed like it was just too much. And I was so tired of hearing, "Oh, when you're older, you'll understand." And then I grew up and I remember like, "Oh, things are really complicated, blah, blah, blah." But then I came back around again to being like, "We're making this way too complicated." like, like why? Again, way too complicated. Um,
Yeah, there is. I actually used to feel the very same way growing up, watching adults and going, "Wow, it could be actually so much simpler." And then the response was always, "But you're a child, you don't understand." It is complicated, like you said. Growing up, though, especially now, I am in my full adulthood. I realize that it isn't complicated. We complicate things. It's
mhm.
complex. It is complex, but it is not complicated.
Yes.
And the way for me to simplify complexity is to ask the right question with an understanding of the answer that I am seeking, the ultimate answer. And my ultimate answer is always, how can I cultivate my happiness here? What brings me happiness? What brings me joy? What brings harmony to this situation? And when I focus on harmony and happiness and joy and love and peace, it literally simplifies the questions so that the complex literally takes a different shape. This is what the founding fathers of the European Union did. Their aim was not retribution, it was not revenge. Their aim was peace. And because they chose peace, every decisions that occurred afterwards were anchored in a desire to practice peace, collective decision making, collaborative decision making, solidarity, the common market, a common destiny, non-discrimination, and equality. All of the principles that were born after the creation of the first community were based on a vision of peace, which meant in order to practice peace, we have to practice harmony. And the aim is to promote well-being and prosperity for European peoples. So when you look at what we are doing today, Antonio Guterres said, we are at war with nature. We are at war with the planet. We are at war with every other life entities on this planet. We, humanity, are at war. We have to stop choosing war and we have to start choosing peace. And peace is practiced by seeking harmonious living. And how do you actually seek harmonious living? You start looking for the things that create harmony. How can I speak with you? How can I relate with you? How can I relate with nature? How can I relate with the nature within me? What nourishes happiness here? What nourishes balance? What nourishes regeneration? These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves because we know the answer. The answer is to practice peace for harmonious living on this earth. The rest is details, and the details are exactly where we need to become active participants of life, not destructors, but creators, nourishers, cultivators, pollinators, carers, healers of life.
Yeah, that's so beautiful and I think so important for anyone in environmental work or social work or anything that is trying to make the world a better place because it's so easy to get in the weeds of how complex things are and then to think that things are complicated and to forget or not recognize or just get a little bit lost. But if you go back to what you said about how can I cultivate happiness for myself in this work, and how can I cultivate harmony in the greater community of whatever it is they're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that's how you can do really hard and challenging work and still
Yeah.
maintain uh I want to say some sanity because sometimes it's a huge struggle. But that perspective can be really therapeutic.
It certainly has been so for me. Um, I'll I'll tell you a little confidence. Um, when
Well, this is a podcast, so
yeah,
I just
yes, thank you for the
remind
reminder.
you, yeah, this is recording.
Okay. When I became pregnant, I became so much more acutely aware of everything that was going wrong in the world.
Mm.
I think it's a common story. And when I had my children, when they were finally born into this world, there was a mixture of absolute elation and utter fear and grief in my heart that I had brought them into a world that was seemingly burning. And I used to cry every night because I give so much love to my children because they give me so much love, but not just because of that. It's just, it's lovely, sharing that kind of love. And when I would put them to bed, I would then go to my bed and cry because I would think about other children without that kind of love, other children without a sense of security and safety, other women unable to provide for their children. I would think about all of this and I would feel utterly, utterly powerless, devastated and powerless, feeling the pain of the world. And I don't need to, to just even stay back in those days. I look at what is going on today everywhere around the world. So much pain.
Mhm.
I bear witness to the pain, but I do not let myself be engulfed by the pain anymore because I cannot afford to do that. I am not in the position of those who are in dire straits in that way. I am in a position of much more influence, however small it might be in my position, however big it might be in comparison. I am in a better position, and I see this as a privileged position. I can do something in my own way, and it starts with me. It starts with taking care of myself. As a parent, as a mother, your first priority is for you to be healthy, to be well, so that you can look after your children. So I take care of myself, and that means taking care of my mental health, taking care of my spiritual health, of my emotional health, of my physical health, in every possible way, with no extremes, just in a balanced way. I need to cultivate my own inner joy. I need to cultivate what brings me joy and love and happiness so that I can actually open up and offer my arms and my solace and my strength and my vision and my joy to lift things up, to hold a space for imagination and creation to arise so that we can really dream a much, much better world than the one we are in now. I cannot afford to drop into despair because when I actually drop into despair, I curl up into a ball. And that is of no use to anyone. So sometimes it is hard. And I start with the little things. Maybe it means eating chocolate or ice cream. Maybe it means, getting into cuddle therapy with my kids. Maybe it means going out for walks with my friends, visiting tree communities, visiting river communities, and listening and communing. So the burnout that we feel, the fears and the anxiety that we feel, it's good to be aware. And I would also say it's good to let it flow away as well, so that we can fill ourselves with the energy that enables us to heal ourselves and others.
Mhm.
I personally feel that I cannot afford to fall apart. It doesn't mean that I don't have moments. But what it means is that when I do have these moments, I ask myself, what do I need? How can I help myself right now? How can I cultivate and nurture a sense of well being in this particular moment? So nature conscious governance is that as well. It's not just what you actually practice on the outside, it's what you practice within yourself, so that you can look at what is the need and you can attend to the need. That is also important.
Yeah, those moments of trying not to despair. What you describe reminds me of two things I found very helpful when I feel overwhelmed by the weight of the world.
Mm,
One was I read that um, what is it called? The Your carbon footprint, that was coined by oil companies, and BP was the first one to put a carbon footprint calculator online so that us as individuals could see how much we're damaging the planet. And the person who was writing this was like, they want you focused on your grocery list. They don't want you focused on being part of collective action because that scares them. And it was really empowering to be like, oh, yeah, they do want me just completely focused and panicked and despairing. Because if I'm, like you say, in those moments of falling apart all the time, I don't have that energy to give. Right. And then uh, many ish years ago, I had the absolute pleasure of hearing Chinupa Hanska speak at my university. And this was during Standing Rock, and he is an Indigenous man. And he said that you can weaponize your privilege for good.
mm-hmm,
And I thought it was such a great way for people to recognize what their privileges are without the call out culture of like, you're so privileged, you don't know what's going on, or you're, this and that, but actually like, hey, this is the position you are in,
mm-hmm,
and this is what you can do with that position for good. This is how you can be part of the solution.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, those things just came up while I was listening to what you were saying. It's so critical, I think, to have these perspectives and these things that remind you that it's worth carrying on when you're in the depths of struggle.
Mm. So, yes, there is that. There is the fact that your own empathy and compassion can be turned against you to put you in a state of fear and guilt and shame and embarrassment. And that is paralyzing because it's a neutralizing technique. We don't want you to look at the bigger picture, just look at the smaller picture. Look at the smaller picture, just deal with yourself in that sense of responsibilizing ourselves, which, is true. We are each individually responsible for our actions.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a kind of like divide and conquer approach because you're right. If you are only looking at individual responsibility without the collective, organizational, systemic, global contextualization, then it's like counting paper clips. You're not going to go anywhere. You're just going to stay very much where you are because you need that systemic strategy in place for it to have any kind of real traction and to create change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to become conscious of that is the first step. And the next step is, yes, it might be outrage, it might be anger, it might be even more paralysis because, you feel powerless. It's like, David and Goliath kind of situation. What can I do? What can I do? Of course. Um, but you can also be empowered by a simple question. What can I do about it? Or what do I want to do about it? How do I want to change this? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be big and massive. It just starts from where you are. We are a part of the whole system, like cells in a much more complex organism. Each one of us can have a ripple effect. A simple smile in your heart that you share on your face with the next person coming next to you might have a massive impact on them. You wouldn't even know it, but it would. And that would have a chain reaction and create something else. And that person could be doing something absolutely amazing and would not have been able to do this if you hadn't smiled at them that day. We don't know because there are invisible threads that pull at us. All we can do really is to become conscious of what we can become conscious of and choose consciously what we want to become, what we want to be in this world. One step at a time. That's it. It relieves the weight.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the intention is focused on doing good, the common good, this is what matters. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's for the courageous. And courage is from the French word courage, le cœur, the heart. So, to be courageous is to lead with your heart. Be open your heart, be open to connecting with people through your heart, to entering into relationships through your heart. Be aware that it is through our connections that we actually grow, really. And this is through our connections that we can actually grow a better world. That's how I look at it. And that's where we find inspiration. That's where we find imagination. That's where we find creation. And that's because we have fun. Seriously, we can't. When is the last time that any of us has done anything with real meaningful impact by being forced to do it? We do much, much better when we actually do it with enthusiasm, with passion. So do what feels right.
Mm-hmm.
And that will lead to what must be done in order to do what feels right as well. And when you look at people in corporations, I love the anonymous they, and we tend to talk about they in those, in those spaces far away from us. But they are human beings too. And those corporations are fictitious, inventions. We human beings have invented them. If the human race was wiped out, there would be absolutely no corporations on this earth. There would be no economic markets. So they are our creation. Therefore, we can recreate, reinvent, and change the way they are because we are human beings. They in those corporations are us. We cannot continue in this paradigm of division and looking at them as being away from us and divided, like they are making us do these things. No, they're not. They are us. We are actually complicit in that system because we believe in their story and their narrative. If we want things to be different, we're going to have to become the change. We're going to have to make the difference. So we have to change the narrative collectively, individually and collectively. We are the ones who can change the narrative. We are the ones who co-create this world. There's a thing as well that always strikes me as really interesting is the fact that we are the only species on this earth who has to pay to be alive, who has to pay to have children, to pay to have an education, to pay to have fun, to pay to have a vacation with our family. We are the only ones who pay to have and enjoy anything. And we are the only ones who have and feel the need and the desire to justify our existence on this earth. it goes back to what I was saying. We need to be loved and to feel loved. And it's not going to happen from anywhere outside of us. The earth loves us already. Gaia loves us already. I'm going to use the she pronoun because that's how I relate to Gaia. It can be it can be he, it can be they, depending on, it can be anything really, but for me it's the she. She is the mother and she provides for us. We have absolutely everything we need to do anything we want. We don't have to throw a tantrum anymore. We don't have to become so greedy that we don't want to share with anyone. We are loved and we are cherished by the earth. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive today. If this entire planet was not conducive to life, we would not be alive. So we are loved. But we are acting as though we are not. That's why the first step is to actually open up our hearts and literally practice, cultivate love for this planet, for ourselves, and for each other. And I know it sounds quite, I don't know, wishy-washy, new agey, anything like that, because that's not professional. That's not rational. That's not what is needed. Well, let me ask a question then. So the so-called professional and rational mind has led us down the beautiful path then, has it?
I literally had this conversation about professionalism, I think, with 2 or 3 colleagues in the last couple months about how professionalism is often weaponized against people trying to do good in the world.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what? Do you know what profession means? Sorry, do you know what being a professional means? It means that you profess what you preach. Oh, sorry, you practice what you profess. My apologies. You practice what you profess. And therefore, being a professional means that you embody the values and the principles that you profess. When I say that nature conscious governance is about practicing peace for harmonious living on earth, and it's based on key principles such as regenerative principles, such as, reciprocal, relational principles and values. When I say that, that means being a professional in my line of work means being relational. It means being reciprocal. It means being respectful. It also means being kind and compassionate and empathic and feeling and relating to the earth as a whole, relating to nature as a whole. That is being professional. When you're in the business of healing the earth, being professional means being in the business of relating to the earth. And you relate from within into the out.
Yeah, I'm like mildly speechless now. I'm just, oh, it's just sinking in right now, and well,
I know.
that is something that I've felt for so long and never quite had the words to
Mm.
express. And I mean, I just think it makes perfect sense because I've been trying to put I've been trying to put things online that I felt I needed as a young person trying to figure out what I was going to do, like in all of the activism and advocacy things that interested me. And I was doing some book reviews, just to let people know that these great books and these perspectives and ideas are out there. And normally they were all just environmentally focused books. But I had to include All About Love by Bell Hooks because of exactly what you're saying, that it starts within, and you have to have this relational experience with yourself and those close to you so that you can practice it on this broader space in your profession. And it's being caring about creating a better future isn't just professionalism as we're taught it's supposed to be, like you've been saying, with, oh, we must use our rational minds and we must do this. It's all about love.
Yes, it is. I mean, we must use our rational minds, but like I said, the rational mind has to follow the path of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
What is right, you know? What I'm saying is nothing new, by the way. It's not something that is um, that hasn't been said before. But when we look at the concept of nature conscious governance, is that we are now bringing it all together because now is the time. We're going back to a radical understanding of life, and by radical I mean the root of that understanding. And it's to understand what the root of life is absolutely needed for us to be able to expand again, because we have come to a point where the rational mind alone, without the path and the understanding of the heart, cannot make sense of the world anymore. The world does not make sense to any one of us anymore. I mean, life is not about the economic market. Life is not about the financial market. Life is not about the political sphere. All of these are elements that have been created by human beings to help us make sense of things and to organize ourselves in society. That is called governance. Governance helps us make sense of what matters, what needs to be addressed, what needs to be taken into consideration in the way that we behave with each other in society. So it's about regulating ourselves, not regimenting ourselves. So as we regulate ourselves, how do we want to regulate ourselves? We have to choose a frequency. And if we choose that frequency purely with the rational mind, we end up being robots. We end up being disconnected, discombobulated from the stuff of life. I read somewhere recently something about, and I can't remember who wrote this, but something about professors who actually think that, their body is only a vehicle for their brains. And it really hit me so hard because as an academic for 20 odd years, I was so into my headspace, but also very much feeling my heart. I kept on trying to figure out how it worked. And then I realized, yes, I wasn't actually paying attention to my body as such because I thought that my body was purely present to carry me around so that I could think. But the overthinking, I mean, the Buddha said, stop overthinking. Because when you overthink, what happens then? You procrastinate. You lose track of things. You lose all sense, meaning of anything. You stop yourself from actually doing anything. Let's stop overthinking, but let's actually start thinking smartly. And the way that we can think smartly, because thinking is a practice, we need to actually feel through our heart what is right.
Mm-hmm.
So nature conscious governance for me is the practice of, so consciousness is the practice of being aware. So for nature conscious governance to be effective, it's to enter into a practice of being aware of our relationality, being aware of our, of our part, of our integral part as a part of nature, as a part of Gaia, as a part of the earth, as a part of the wider earth community, and what it means, and simplify our lives. Our lives are not about, just going to work, making money, and and feeding the system, the economic system, the financial system, and all of that. It is about life. The point of life is life. How do we cultivate life, a meaningful life, a joyous life, a harmonious life? And I know I'm not giving any sort of like detailing how to put this into application. Well, that's what we're working on with the Nature, Governance Agency. Um, the Nature Governance Agency is a branch of the Earthful Center, and our job, our mission, anyways, is to enable organizations, in particular, put into practice nature conscious governance, because the aim is for them to become an integral part of practicing harmony, of nurturing and cultivating harmony. So when we work with organizations, we don't work with a fictitious organization. We work with the human beings at the heart of these organizations, because the human beings are the ones who can actually create the change. It's a cultural change first. So we teach them, we help them, we guide them on how to become conscious, how to become nature conscious, how to make wise decisions, how to think systemically in a way that makes sense for cultivating life. It's just going back to the basics. It's almost like a re-education. Well, it is actually, I suppose. We are re-educating ourselves about what it is that we're doing here on this planet.
That is, I think, the perfect note to end on. Re-educating ourselves about what we're doing here on this planet.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is fantastic. And thank you so much for coming on the show and diving into the concept of nature conscious governance. It has been absolutely fantastic and probably quite therapeutic. I think I'm going to be listening to this one again on hard days.
Thank you so much for having me, Tara. I really appreciate the invitation, and the conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.